My guest this morning is Shayna Rattler. As you know, we were scheduled about a month ago or a month and a half ago, and between the publicist, Pam Perry, and I, both of us got our signals crossed up, and each one of us thought we had contacted Shayna, and neither one of us did. So when Shayna didn't show up, we understood why. There was mixed signals. There was a failure to communicate. So we've gotten that straightened out, and she is here this morning. Shayna Rattler is a prophetic minister, author, and speaker who empowers others to experience a God shift that moves them from disruption into a greater destiny. She is passionate about helping others develop a deeper understanding of God and the identity they have in Him. Shayna has helped thousands of individuals and organizations around the world achieve personal growth and organizational excellence. She and her businesses have received multiple awards, has previously published 3 books, and has been featured in over 450 media outlets. Shayna is also hosts the God Shift podcast and the God Shift TV show. If you want to learn more about joining the movement, you can go to www.agodshift.com. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Reading Circle microphone, Shayna Rattler. Shayna, good morning.
Good morning, good morning. I was listening to your weather thinking, oh gosh, I'm glad I live in Texas.
Yeah, it's warm down there in Texas. You're right. Matter of fact,
warmer than that.
My aunt is down there right now. She went down there to visit Houston, and she'll be going back to North Carolina, this evening. And so, yeah, she's been down there for the last week, and she lived down there for some years, and then she went back to visit, and she'll be heading back to North Carolina. But she was telling me last night that it's warm, but a cold front was coming.
I know. I'm not happy about it, but it's coming.
You might be getting some of this cold that we have here.
Gee, thanks.
So I'll tell you, good to have you on here. My usual question is, because I know like the impetus for this particular book or your work was what you call a God shift.
Mm-hmm.
And so before we even get to the God shift, let's talk a little bit about where did it all start? Did you ever consider yourself as being an author and podcast host, or is it something that started in your youth, or did it come later on, or let's walk back a little and work our way up to a God shift.
Absolutely. So as a child, my mother jokingly says that I spoke way before most kids usually speak, especially in complete sentences. So I kind of, as a child was able to recognize that communication was easy for me, whether it was spoken communication or whether it was written communication. And so it just kind of followed me, along. I jokingly say if I could ever meet my 3rd grade teacher again or see him again, I would always tell him, see, you kept telling me to be quiet, now I get paid to talk. So communication has always been easy for me, and it's always followed me. I didn't know, in what capacity I would use it in. And frankly, I didn't have any. I wanted to be a model. I wasn't thinking about communicating. But I guess they say your gifts will make room for you, and I also believe that everywhere you go, there you are. So my communication has definitely, followed me as a child into my adult career and endeavors.
So did you public speak as a child, or were you just talkative? And I'm asking that question because...
running my mouth. It wasn't no format. It wasn't no request. I was just running my mouth.
Because public speaking is such a required skills these days. That's why I was wondering, did you do that as a child, or did that come later? Or just the fact that you were communicative or talkative, it just lent itself to one day speaking publicly?
It absolutely did. And as I got involved in business and getting involved in business organizations, there would be times where it was like, hey, you get to do your 30-second elevator pitch, whatever the case may be. And it kind of just turned into, oh, wow, she's really good. Maybe we should bring her in for a workshop. And I quickly realized how much of a gift it was. Like, I do very little preparation, and not because I don't value preparation, but speaking is such a gift for me that doing a lot of preparation is not required. There's been times that I've been driving on my way to speaking engagements, especially if it's not the regular talk that I give. Like, the University of Memphis brought me in one day to talk about entrepreneurship. I was literally thinking about what I was going to say on the way there. And I do like I do every time. I even did it this morning. Lord, decrease me and increase you and give me a word for your people. And it just spills out as if I had been, rehearsing in the mirror for hours.
I can honestly and totally relate to what you're saying, because a lot of what I do, and as I was sharing with you this morning, I don't work off a question sheet. It really is conversational, and I develop each question based on each response. But a lot of what I do is because I just think sometimes free flowing, and everybody has their own style. There are some people that are very structured and they have to, and then there are other folks that just can kind of flow. When I have to be structured for my job or whatever, then I have to do what I have to do. But most of the time, in terms of I agree with you. Until I have to give a speech or something, I know what I'm going to say, and if I have my 3 points or what have you, I know how I'm going to hit it. But once I know what the objective or the message I want to get across, I just let it go. And so I know exactly what you're talking about. And interestingly enough, usually whenever I get ready to get up on a stage or talk or whatever, I ask God the same thing. Just, let me get the word, the message across, whatever it is you'd like to have me say. Please help me to say it, help it to be received, so forth and so on. So let's talk a little bit about, I was reading your book, and I understand how you went and how you got this shift into the ministry. But let's talk a little bit about what you were doing prior to becoming a minister or going into the ministry.
Absolutely. So I went to school to be a physical therapist, and I quickly, after graduating from therapy school, had a staffing agency that was dropped in my lap. And so my pastor was like, you've done so much at such a young age. Like, why don't you come in and teach some classes on how to make money and how to start a business and how to grow a business? And so I was actually coaching people far before I knew that there was an industry for coaching. And so I was an occupational therapist. I guess technically I still am. I was licensed as an occupational therapist 18 years ago. And in 2007 is when I entered into the coaching arena and started teaching people how to start businesses and how to grow businesses. And I started off with more of a general, hey, here's how you start businesses. And I actually ended up refining that and getting more into teaching business owners how to land corporate contracts and how to land corporate sponsors. And I was doing that up until 2018 when I had my first God Shift that I was being called into ministry.
So,
and it wasn't that pretty. I make it sound like it had cute little bows on it, but it wasn't that pretty.
Well, that's interesting, and we're going to talk about that in terms of when a God shift occurs. Most likely, it's not going to be pretty. As a matter of fact, let us go on there in terms, because the first line in the book is, "What the hell is going on?" And I could not. Tell you how much I relate. Matter of fact, I've said those exact same words, particularly over something I experienced. I guess I'm in the process of experiencing a God shift that started over this summer. And that was exactly the words that I said was, what the hell is going on? So it says 6 words that many people of faith ask about our lives at one point or another. Now, what's interesting about that, you said, is people of faith. Because, see, a lot of times people think that people of faith don't go through anything.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We think that because we're doing things the way that the Lord would have us to do, and we say that we're doing things to give Him glory, that it's going to be easy. I mean, I don't know where we got that from, because that's not even scriptural. The Bible tells us that, we will have trials and tribulations. So I don't know why we think, and I believe that, faith doesn't make it easy, but it does make it possible. But I think it's important, like, what is a God shift? To me, the definition of a God shift is that a moment of disruption in your life collides with God's purpose, but it ultimately gets you into a greater destiny. So it usually isn't pretty. It usually doesn't feel good. It's kind of like vegetables, meaning that it's not good to you, but it's good for you. And let me just say, disruption doesn't always have to be negative, but I do believe that when negative circumstances come into our lives, that those are the ones that we give the most attention to or get our attention the most.
Absolutely. So it says, again, 6 words that many people of faith ask about our lives at one point or another. Does this sound familiar? Yes, it does. I'm raising my hand. Life is going well. Of course it is. You planned it this way. Yes, that's right. You start off each year setting goals and maybe even creating a vision board. Yep, been there, do that still. You attend classes, read books, follow the right people online who have been where you're headed, and step by step things fall into place. Things aren't perfect, but they're on track. Your career is excelling, you live in a great neighborhood, and you may even be with the man or woman of your dreams. Yep, things are going as planned until they are not. Capital N-O-T. All of a sudden you find yourself in a place you don't understand. Hello? You're not meeting the goals you set. Your job feels less fulfilling. Some of your most beloved relationships are rocky at best. And overall you feel overwhelmed and out of control. You try everything you can think to fix your problems, praying about it, talking to others about it, attempting tactics that have worked successfully in the past, or maybe you even attempt to ignore it. Neither your brains, talents, experience, or anything that has moved you forward in the past is helping you to get back up from the curveball, and that is a wonderful way to describe it, the curveball you've been thrown. This is so accurately described that it's not funny. So let's talk a little bit about, your God shift, because I'm reading from the beginning of the book, but as you read, Shayna explains what her God shift was and what she was going through. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So I actually had two God shifts. The first one was from the Lord. The second one was self-imposed and didn't have to happen. We'll kind of get to that, I'm sure. But when I was in business around 2018, I described in the book that everything I touched turned to dirt. And I get it, that the saying is everything I touched turned to gold, but that wasn't my story. People were hiring me to do things that I know I do well, probably even talk about in my sleep, and I simply just could not perform. It was around April. I'd only made a fraction of the money that I had typically made in my business historically. By that point in the year, my relationships around me just were like I said in the book, rocky at best. And I believe that God had to use those circumstances because he was calling me to ministry. Because, like those of us who are parents, we know our children, and we know in what ways we have to communicate with our children in order to get our point across. And the Lord knows that I'm not the type of person that you can just gently nudge. I'm not the type of person that you can whisper. You have to be pretty drastic in order to get my attention. And I believe that had I continued to make great money, speak all around the world, do all the things that I wanted to do, that I absolutely would have ignored if he said that he was calling me to ministry. So he allowed all of those things around me to dry up, and I left myself going, Lord, I don't know what you're doing. I know you're up to something, but I have no idea what that was. And you'll have to read the book to see, exactly what the chain of events was after that just made it so crystal clear that I was being called to use my gifts that I had used in the marketplace to now help him build the kingdom. So that was my initial God shift to get me, because I believe that it's an invitation, right, Mark? It's an invitation because I was pursuing something that was not on the path that he had planned for me. So if there's something that we're putting our energy into, a physical place, a relationship, a mindset, whatever it is, he's committed to his results. So he's going to do what he has to do to get our attention so that he can invite us into what it is that he really has for us. And that's what he used in my life, because he's like, yep, great things. You did great things in the marketplace, but now I need you to help me build the kingdom, reaching the people that are going to relate to you.
So as you go through this period or time of this dry spell, and like you just said, God, I don't know what on earth you're doing. How do you process that, and how do you go through that? Because it's in most instances, and from what I'm experienced, it's easier said than done. It's one thing
Absolutely.
to be able to say. People are real quick and easy to say that. I would just move on, just get over it. But the truth of the matter is, as you're going through that, it takes a little time to process and wade through that, while at the same time saying exactly what you just said. God, I have no idea what you're doing. I know, from a scriptural and spiritual and wisdom standpoint, I know the answer, but I just want to hear it and talk about it.
Sure, it wasn't easy at all, especially because shortly before that, I was done writing books. I'd written two. I didn't plan on writing anymore, and it's at the top of the year in, I believe, 2018. No, it was 17, and it was actually prophesied to me, the Lord needs you to write this next book, and I was like, oh God, here we go. And so I did it. I wrote a book, wrote the blueprint on how you land corporate sponsors, and I had just spent about 32 $1,000 on that book launch, and it flopped. And so it was right after that that he was like, okay, I want you to shut that down and come over here and do this. And I was like, wait a minute. You mean you want me to shut down what you just told me to do? And I was clear because, not only did I receive the word of prophecy, but I received multiple confirmations. I was clear that what I was doing was what the Lord told me to do. And then right after I did what he told me to do, he told me to shut it down and do something else. So I was like, dude, you got jokes. So it wasn't easy. I think one of the most difficult things to do is to let go, especially letting go of what it is that we had planned. But it was a rocky period. I mean, not to brag, but I've made great money from a very early age. I mean, the very first house I ever owned was a 3,000 square foot new build. So I was accustomed to being able to do what I wanted to do, when I wanted to do it. I was accustomed to having an and lifestyle, and now I found myself in an or lifestyle. Do you pay for this or do you pay for that? There were 2 months in the month of June and July of 2017 that I put my mortgage on a credit card. Like, that's unheard of. I'd never lived like that in my entire life. So it wasn't easy, but I said, well, guess what? I've tried everything I know to do, and nothing is working. So I have no choice but just to say, okay, Lord, I guess I'm just going to walk blindly and see where you lead me. I don't think you're leading me to, complete devastation, so I'll just have to walk this out. But there were days I couldn't get out of the bed. There were days I didn't want to talk to people. There were days I couldn't get out of the bed. There were weeks that I didn't even go check the mail for 5 or 6 days because I was like, listen, I don't know what this is, and I don't like it.
And see, that is so important to share because, again, people know what they see on the outside. They don't necessarily know the behind the scenes. And at the same time, we say God knows the heart. God looks on the heart while man can see what's going on the outside. So what you just said, like nobody knew you were paying your mortgage on your credit card. Nobody knew you would go these days without even going out to the mailbox. All they saw was this fine Shayna coming out there happy and bubbly and doing her thing.
Yeah. I think, we can sum it up like if you're experiencing something that you're like, look, I don't know what it is. Something's just off. Like the bottom line is, something is just off. I don't know what, I don't know why, but I know I want to move past it.
That's exactly it right there. I don't know what, I don't know why, but I got to get through this. That's exactly right. So, I mean, and speaking of that, now in chapter 3, because we are working from the book here, and this is the thing. I told you earlier, it's not a book with like a zillion pages. It's not that. And it's not teeny tiny print. It's not that. So you could get through it relatively quickly, but the information is heavy, it's deep, it causes some reflection and for you to think. So chapter 3 is, do you need a God shift?
Yeah.
Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. There's a number of signs. We've talked about some of, my experiences, some of your experiences, but it's not even always because something bad is going on. Sometimes, things are going well, but you just sense that there's something more. You think there's something more that you should have. You think that there's something more that you should be. You think there's something more that you should do. So there's a number of signs that are out there that are trying to get your attention. But if you find yourself complaining, if you find yourself wondering, if you find yourself, dreaming, and I'm not saying that dreaming is a bad thing, but dreaming like, oh my gosh, I've done so much, but I still want more. Like, I believe that all of those are indications that you need a God shift, because remember, I believe that God uses those things, to get our attention. Nothing happens by coincidence. So for me, I had that, what the hell is going on moment. But for some of you all, it may just be burnout. It may be stress. It may be overwhelm. It may be, you're at a crossroads. Do you stay on the path that you're on? Do you go in a different direction? There's a lot of things that could be happening in your life, but I can almost guarantee you that if you find yourself going, I'm just a little bit frustrated, I don't really like where I am, and it's consistent and it's persistent, more than likely you need a God shift. And
as we talk that in terms of, I told you the book is relatively short. It's There's a line from Adam Clayton Powell's movie, Keep the Faith Baby, that he says a good speech ought to be like a woman's skirt. Long enough to be interesting. No, what is it? Long enough to be, I forget how he said, long enough to be informative. I have to go back to the exact quote, but it's funny, but short enough to be interesting. It was like long enough to be informative, or something, but short enough to be interesting. And I have to go back and get it because it's one of my favorite quotes out of the movie Keep the Faith Baby. But in any event, chapter 2 says, what is disruption? Disruption comes in many forms and affects various aspects of your life. It can impact you physically, geographically, relationally, emotionally, financially, and or spiritually. And the quote just came back to me. It's long enough to be respectful and short enough to be interesting. There it is.
Yeah.
In the simplest definition, disruption is a disappointment, delay, or detour that distracts you from your destiny. Sometimes as you're experiencing a God shift, you will be required to let go of trash, and other times you will be required to let go of treasures. In other words, a disruption is not always a negative, just like Shayna was just saying. For example, your disruption could be betrayal from someone close to you that you have to separate from or divorce. Or you could be presented with a major job promotion that requires you to move across the country away from your friends and family, but is the most fulfilling role you've had and earns you the most money you've ever had or made. It's important to note even the most challenging disruptions, regardless of what you feel at the time, are designed to develop you and not destroy you. In fact, they must happen in order to move you into your next chapter. Without them, you may stay on the path you start out on and miss the opportunity to discover your life's purpose. Now, to me, I mean, that it makes all kinds of sense. But as we were just saying a couple of minutes ago, as you're going through it, because this is the thing, God knows the past, God knows the present, and the one that we can't see that he can see is the future.
And I believe that the scripture that is the easiest to forget, and this is just my opinion, I believe that the scripture that is the easiest to forget is, it all works together for the good of those who love the Lord and that are called according to their purpose. I believe that
Romans 8:28. Yep.
Yes, I believe that conceptually and in our minds, we know that all things work together for good, but when you're going through it, when you're in the middle of it and it doesn't feel good, I believe that that's the easiest scripture for us to forget, and I believe that it is the easiest time for us to doubt, even though doubt and destiny are polar opposites.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm going through the book, and I see you have in bold and in quotes, Lord, is this really you? In other words, we, some of these things, like I know the so-called people of God has done some things that are just straight up wrong. And in their minds, I think they think God told them or him or her to do that. And so it's kind of like, all right, now I'm sorry, on the surface, if you describe what went down and what went on from a so-called woman or man of God, and if they try to say, no, that's what God told me to do, some of that stuff I don't buy. And that's where I was kind of like, Lord, is this really you?
Yeah. I definitely questioned it because I was like, you had just told me to do this, and I did that. And I mean just told me. It wasn't like, oh, well, that was 4 or 5 years ago, so maybe that assignment is over, because there's a difference between assignment and calling, right? And so our assignments expire. Our assignment, meaning who it is that we are called to help, if you want to use that word, that can change. My assignment used to be business owners. Now my assignment is, helping believers chase their destiny. So it wasn't even like, oh, well, maybe that just assignment is up. I'm like, no, you just told me. And I just spent $32,000. So I was like, are you sure? Like, this can't be him. He just told me to do that.
I'm looking here where you were working with one of your clients, and he says, Shayna, I hired you to teach me how to grow my business, but I learned more about God and grew closer to him as a result of working with you. So was the calling always, was it one of those where you were just being you, and because of that folks were seeing God? Or were you always feeling led to lead people to God?
Well, it's interesting. I don't know that was ever my intention. I don't know that I was ever strategic and intentional about leading people to God. I do know that I felt like I always lived a siloed life. I never found a way to, and I don't like using the word brand when we're talking about, things of faith, but that's the best word that I can think of. I never really found a way to fully brand myself to be everything that I was. I felt like over here, you got Faith Shayna, and over here you got Business Shayna. Now, when you hired Business Shayna, you couldn't help but to give Faith Shayna because, again, everywhere you go, there you are. And so when people would hire me, just through the nature of me coaching them and just being who I am, I talk about the things that I know and that I love and that helped me. And so when I quote unquote announced my calling, many of my friends and clients are like, "What do you mean accepted your, like, you've been preaching and prophesying in my life since I've known you." And again, it was never intentional. It was just, the matters of the heart, flow out of your mouth. And so since it was in me, it couldn't help to come out of me. And one of the coaches that I was working with, and I refer to her in the book, is that she said, it's time to just be Shayna. And that was so liberating for me to feel like now my faith could be forward-facing, even in business. I found a way to blend both faith and business. And so when the God Shift movement was birthed, it was actually a relief to me because if I can be honest, I was actually fearful that when I said yes to ministry, that means that I was going to have to say no to a lot of the things that I had always done. And I realized that nothing was wasted. And so although I don't market myself as a business coach, although I don't market myself as a lot of those things, I still have the opportunity when I'm helping people, get to their next level of destiny to share about the knowledge that I have from the business world that I have been, building over several years. But I didn't know what that was going to look like, and so it was actually really liberating. So the short answer is no, I never strategically tried or saw myself as somebody who was going to help build the kingdom. I didn't have a problem sharing with people of who I thought God was and what I thought they should do to allow them into their life, but it was never really part of the plan.
Chapter 5 says, is it God's shift or yours? And this is going back to kind of like that question a couple of minutes ago, Lord, is this really you? How do you know? How do you determine if it's God's shift or if it's your shift? I mean, I know what I want to do, but then again, God has something totally different in mind. I know what I want, but maybe God wants something different. How do you know if it's your shift or God's shift?
I want to answer that two different ways. So on one hand, I do believe that, like I said earlier on, God is committed to his results. So if you don't get it the first time, he'll send somebody else. As you read my story, I couldn't ignore it. It was showing up in messages. It was showing up, I was at the assisted living facility with my father, and just the people that sit at his dinner table were calling him, and I could not ignore it. So the signs will continue to show up. The confirmations will continue to show up because God speaks in many different ways. He speaks through dreams. He speaks through his word. He speaks through other people. But the other thing is that you don't have to be completely sure in order to start. Because I believe that if we are going to take a risk, I believe if we are going to walk into an uncharted area, we only need to be somewhat sure that it's what we should be doing. Because God is the best GPS that is out there. So if we start moving our feet and he needs us to go left when we should have gone right, he will course correct us. Whether he'll shut it down completely and there'll just be no grace on what it is that you're trying to do, or he'll just course correct you and put you on the right path. So if you're starting to feel the nudge, ask yourself, what is one small thing that I can do? Step out and see how he responds, and then sometimes that's when you fully know whether it's him or not. The problem is that when our steps are laced with uncertainty, we don't take any. And so then you'll never know whether it was you, whether it was God. It ain't going to matter because you didn't do nothing with it anyway.
If you've just joined me, listening audience, my guest this morning is Shayna Rattler. And we're talking about her work, specifically her book, A God Shift. And see, even that is an interesting way or an interesting perspective to look at what occurred or is occurring in terms of, because again, a lot of times a God shift is not something that feels good. Matter of fact, it's not something that you even think is logical. But if you look biblically, a lot of time God does the ridiculous to get the miraculous.
Mm-hmm. Faith never makes sense in your current context.
Correct.
If it did, it wouldn't require faith.
That is correct. Absolutely. So now I'm looking at chapter 6 because I'm actually working my way through the book and I'm jumping back and forth. But chapter 6 says, are you shifting or not?
Yeah. Make up your mind.
That is correct. Now, is that okay? Let me ask it this way based on that we're saying it. Is that because you don't want to shift, or you're reluctant to shift, or you just want to have it your way, or what could be causing you not to shift?
It could be all. It could be all of those things. It could be scared to shift. It could be doubt. It could be all of those things that you just mentioned. You don't want to do it. Like I think I say at some point in the book that one of the most important things when you're shifting, but one of the most difficult, is letting go. And so sometimes it's letting go of what we had in mind. Sometimes it's letting go of who we had in mind. So sometimes we're not shifting because we don't want to. Sometimes we're not shifting because we're scared to. Sometimes we're not shifting because we don't know exactly where we're going, and we're not willing to move our feet. Like, even though we know that the word says that the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, I say stop asking him to order your steps if you're not going to move your feet. There's so many of us that are like, I'm praying for this and I'm praying about that, and then when you get the answer, you want to pray about it again. That's disrespectful, right? Like, I'm going to pray about it. No, you're using prayer as a form of procrastination.
Right.
Because you prayed about it, he gave you the answer. Now you got to pray about the answer? Like, what are we doing? Are you going or are you not?
Absolutely. And the interesting point you just made was this whole notion of letting go. And I use it. Let's say, for example, you're on a job that you love, or as you say, making money that you love, and all of a sudden you get fired. How do you now, like, you didn't expect it, you didn't know it was coming, all of a sudden you get the pink slip, you're let go. How do you process that? Or same thing, if it's a relationship, all of a sudden your partner no longer wants to be your partner. How do you process that?
Yeah, I say you get 3 days to be in your feelings, because I'm not one of those people that's just going to sit here and just get you straight to the solution. How many of us have friends and family that you're going through something horrific and they're like, well, God will look, I knew God was
right.
good. Like, I don't want to hear that right now. Like, so I think you get 3
That's right.
Okay, so you get 3 days to be in your feelings. But when those 3 days are up, I want you to remind yourself that what happened didn't happen to you. It happened for you, and it happened for others. Because that's the bottom line. Everything we go through happens for us, and oftentimes it happens for others, because you are being designed and shaped and refined to be able to help other people who are going through exactly what it is that you're going through right now. Many of us have gone through divorce because we're being called to coach other people who are going through divorce. Some of us have lost our jobs because God knew you would never take the step to be an entrepreneur, but he's like, I let go of this job and didn't allow you to get another one because you'd be forced to try to figure out how to make money on your own. My problem was, this was where my second God shift came into play, is that even though he was very clear about what it is that he told me that my ministry was going to consist of, I just defaulted to what I knew. I took my new vision, filtered it through old perspective, and since I'd been coaching for so long, I created a coaching business out of it. He didn't say nothing about no coaching. He said stadiums, TV shows, celebrities, and politicians. And then I went and created something that was way too small. And when I say small, I mean the anointing on my life was way too big for what it was that I created, albeit good, albeit that it helped a handful of people. But I definitely didn't get the traction that I should have gotten. But it was because I thought to myself, well, Lord, I don't want to not be in action. I don't want to be guilty of not being in action. I know that you'll bless what I put my hands to. And then I just said, why didn't I give him, in hindsight, why didn't I at least give him a version of the vision to bless? I'm over here creating a coaching business, and he over here talking about something completely different. Like, I didn't even say, like, well, Lord, since you say that I'm going to have a television show, let me just start going on YouTube and talking and see what comes from that. Like, no, I was over here creating challenges, workbook, all kinds of mess that he didn't tell me to do. And it wasn't mess because it wasn't helpful, but that's not what he showed me. So the question is, are you going to shift or are you not? You going to create something that he didn't tell you to create, or are you just going to stay stuck? Like, what are we doing?
I know that's right. I tell you, in the beginning of the book, because I keep emphasizing, because I know, Shayna, there are folks, even folks who listen to this show, and the show is about reading who don't like to read. This
Yeah.
I know already. And I'm trying to
Shame
help
on
you
them.
all. Yeah, exactly. So I'm trying for those of you who really who don't like to read or don't feel you have the time to read. This one you can do. Like I said, it's not teeny tiny print with a lot of pages, but Shayna does give you in the beginning of the book how to read it. How to read a God Shift. To make sure you get the absolute best results from your copy of a God Shift, I've set up some easy guidelines for you to follow. Write in the margins. Take notes. Write questions and insights you have as you're reading. Make this book work for you. If you have a digital version of this book, I'd suggest printing it out. Turn off distractions. Turn off your phone. Put the kids to bed. Play soft music. Log out of social media. And give yourself a break from all the noise so you can focus on you and your life. You deserve it. Read this book as if it were a devotional. Pray about what you're reading and journal your thoughts and ideas along your journey. Share your notes and insights with your spouse, business partners, friends, or accountability partners. Commit to your reading. Don't be interested in success. Be committed. Set a time aside to read a chapter a day. And again, they're not that long. We're actually working. We're giving you a synopsis, or hopefully we are whetting your appetite to order the book as we talk about the chapter titles and then do a commentary on each one. So now we get to chapter 7. Elevate God's position in your life.
Yeah. So what we're getting into right now is I have a 3-part formula, and it's called Give, Get, Go. And the formula stands for give God authority in your life, get in His presence, and go where you're needed next. That's kind of the formula for putting your God shift in motion. I believe that there is another level of destiny, that awaits every single one of us. I believe that a God shift is required to reveal it and access it. And so it's not that it's hard to do. It's just that the things that we are going to do, we're going to have to do them God's way. And I believe that the foundation of all of this is elevating God's position in your life. If we don't start with that, then anything else that I could tell you, anything else that I could teach you would be like trying to build a house on sinking sand instead of a solid foundation. So we have to recognize that all of this that is happening is God's plan. So the very first thing that we have to do is actually elevate His position in our life. Yes, you have to do that even if you're a pastor. Yes, you have to do that even if you've been a believer for 65 years. There's another level. God wants you to go higher, and He wants you to go deeper in Him. So it's absolutely necessary that we give Him authority. We're going to have to ride shotgun on this one.
And then we're moving on into chapter 8, prepare. Now, you heard Shayna and I talking earlier. We're more kind of like the go with the flow, wing it types to a degree. But at the same time, there are some things we have to prepare for. It says, prepare for your promised land.
So chapter 8 is getting into the second part of the formula, which is G, get in His presence. I believe that His promises are in His presence. And so in chapter 8, we're talking about spending time in prayer, spending time in worship, spending time being quiet and being in His presence so that we can actually hear the instructions. I believe that I read somewhere one time that every single day, and it may be more now because this was probably 5 or 6 years ago, that every single day we have 10,000 messages in front of us, whether they're auditory, whether they're visual, whatever. We have over 10,000 messages that are in front of us every single day. So if you're wondering if this is God, if you're not really clear on what it is that He is asking you to do or who it is that He's asking you to become, sometimes we just need to shut off the noise and actually spend some time in His presence so that we can hear the instructions, so that we can actually know what it is that He's asking us. So chapter number 8 is all about how do you actually get in His presence? How do you actually become who it is that He's asking you to become? Because I believe that that's more important than what it is that He wants you to do. And I also believe that that's the prerequisite for the doing. We all ask the wrong question, Lord, what do you want me to do? When we should be asking, who do I need to become? Because if we will focus on developing those areas of our lives, the doing usually takes care of itself.
You were talking earlier about signs that you can just kind of feel that things aren't going right. Say, for example, on the job, like you're constantly feeling like, you know what, there's more than this. My boss is always on my back. This is going wrong. This is going wrong. This one's humiliating me. Talk to me a little bit about, as you're seeing those signs, and it's, you feel like, you know what, this is a God shift. And I know we were talking about that whole thing with, and I'll use the job example. You sit there and lose a stable income, and now you're getting ready to step out on, I got to go look for another job, or I'm going to be an entrepreneur. It's almost like, okay, God, well, who's going to take care of me during this period when nothing's coming in?
Yeah. Well, first of all, if you're a believer, you already know He's not going to let that happen.
Correct.
He's not going to allow you to starve to death. So let's just debunk that, right? But don't suffer in silence. I believe that many of us, the reason why we're suffering or we're taking longer to accomplish the things that we need to accomplish is because we're not willing to be transparent enough with people to let them know either A, that we're having some hardships, or B, we're not even willing to share the vision with them that God gave us. And oftentimes, people would be willing to support your vision or support your struggles if they knew what you were experiencing. But many of us just want to be, I don't even know what we're trying to be, but, yes, God is God all by Himself, but He doesn't desire for it to just be you and Him. He doesn't desire for you to figure this all out on your own. So I believe that we could either stop struggling or we could actually have some velocity on our vision if we would just stop feeling like we need to move in silence. I don't know who came up with that. Now, obviously, you need to be mindful of who you share things with, but this whole move in silence and just waiting until God has already done it, being like, ta-da, that's not faith, and it definitely doesn't help anybody else build theirs. So don't suffer in silence. Tell people what you're going through and tell people what it is that you're going to so they can support you.
See, and that's good advice there in terms of not suffering in silence. I remember when we were on doing when we were whetting the appetite a couple of weeks ago or a couple of months ago, we had ended the conversation, you're going to get double for your trouble.
Yeah.
So number 9, determine your priorities. This is chapter number 9. And again, folks, we're talking let me see now. What is the total number of chapters in here? I see chapter 12, 13. All right, so we're talking a 13-chapter book, and I'm really trying to encourage you, order the book. It is worth it. It's one of those that it doesn't, this is one of the things in education we have tried to help teachers understand is you don't have to give 500 problems to determine if your child knows how to do the problem or not. You can give 3 to 5 problems and get a feel for whether or not the child knows how to. Well, this book is like that. You don't need volumes. You don't need War and Peace for what Shayna's trying to tell us. And I strongly
it's intentional, Mark. I could have made this 300 pages, but I'm like,
right.
What? My grandmother used to say, when you're good, it don't take all day. So, let's just be good. Let me just get to the point. Like, there's not a lot of fluff. Whether you read a business book of mine or whether you read something like this, there's not a lot of fluff. Because I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not here to encourage you. I'm not here to motivate you. I'm here to transform you. So in order to do that, let's just get to the point. And if it's going to be 300 pages, most of y'all ain't going to get through it. And I'm more committed to you actually getting to the next level of destiny that God has for you than I am, somebody being concerned about, like, ooh, maybe she didn't have a whole lot to say. No, I had a whole lot to say. I just said it in less words.
I know that's right. So, and chapter 9 is determine your priorities. And she starts the chapter off, as she said earlier, her goal was to be a supermodel. Mm-hmm. And as you can see, as life has taken Shayna through different turns and twists and shifts, where she is at the moment. So what are you talking about when you say determine your priorities?
So we've been shoulded on. SHOULD. We have been shoulded on. Sometimes we should on ourselves. Sometimes people with great intentions in our lives should on us. And you know what that looks like. You should focus on your career before you have kids. You should wait until your kids are out of the house before you start something new. So when I'm talking about determining your priorities, once you're clear on what the vision is that God gave you, you need to be clear what it is that you want versus what it is that other people want for you. Because, again, sometimes people with the best of intentions can talk you out of your vision because they're giving you bad advice. So you have to really think about when it comes to your time and your finances and all the different things that touch our lives, the only way that we're really going to be able to get where we're going well and with a certain level of grace and ease is how we manage those things, our relationships. Like, all of those things are important, but it starts with you have to know what it is that you want for you, and you have to know if somebody else has an opinion for you or advice for you, does it really apply?
So as you go through these different shifts, because in many instances, particularly the negative ones, some of these God shifts can be painful. Where does pain fit into that?
I think that where your pain and your passions intersect, that's your purpose. So the things that hurt you, or the things that frustrate you, or the things that you wish you could change, and the things that you would do differently, and the things that you would like to do, I think that that's where your purpose is birthed. So pain is part of the process. Like when we think about diamonds, when we think about pearls, when we think about olive oil, all those things had to go through a painful process.
Correct.
In order for them to be refined into the end product that we know, love, and enjoy. Same thing for us. We don't want to go through anything. T.D. Jakes said something one time. We all want the promise, but none of us want the process.
Correct.
You can't forego the process. You can't microwave the process. You can't skip the process. You can't ignore the process. So regardless of how long it takes, regardless of how painful it is, the process has to be there if you want the promise to be at its fullest potential. That's the preacher in me giving you.
I know that's right. Go ahead. So, I had a preacher on week before last. I hate it. She's a minister just like you are. I don't know. You might even know each other. Letitia Nicole. I don't know if you and Letitia know each other, but Letitia was my guest 2 weeks ago, and she's a minister as well. And I have no problem with going into preach mode when we're on the air, because it's needed. It really is. If there ever was a time that we need the word, if we need some positivity, it is now. Because you want to talk about God shift. I think COVID in and of itself was a God shift for the world.
Of course it was. All those things that we were making idols out of, he was like, oh, okay, let me just remove all that. Entertainment, jobs, all the things that were getting in the way. He's like, let me shut all that down.
And it was worldwide, too. It wasn't even one country. It was worldwide.
Exactly. Again, the Lord is committed to his results, and he will allow things to happen in order to get our attention. So the question is what did you do with your time during COVID? So if there were things that you've always said that you would do, but the excuse was you didn't have the time, if you didn't do that during COVID, time wasn't your issue.
Right. Absolutely. Could not agree with you more. And chapter 10 says, deepen your faith.
Yeah.
First line says, you cannot experience a God shift without great faith.
You can't. And again, it doesn't matter what your role is. You could be a bishop. You're going to have to deepen your faith if you're going to get through your God shift. You've been walking with the Lord 42 years. You're going to have to deepen your faith in order to get through your God shift. It's going to be required because for many of us, if we could do, what's the Tasha Cobb Leonard's and the Kier Sheard song, not by might, not by power, but your spirit, Lord. Like if we could get out of what we're in on our own, then we wouldn't even be having this conversation. We wouldn't even need a Savior.
Correct.
But most of us are being asked to become something or to go somewhere that is unknown for us. So it continues to be a faith walk for me. I'm going to use my prophetic gift for celebrities and politicians. Oh, what's like CNN's going to let me prophesy? Like, what are we doing? Like, none of it makes sense, but I have to have the faith to know that if he said it, that he will actually make sure that I see it, right? So, when you're thinking about your faith, you have to recognize that your faith is always going to stretch you, and it's almost never going to make sense in your current context, but it's absolutely required in order for us to get anywhere, especially if God has given us something big or if he's given us something that's somewhat unique.
Well, I'm looking at the quote, and again, it's in bold. I like this one. I might even quote this one on Facebook. What seems like a risk to you is business as usual to God. I like that.
Yep. Yeah. It's not risky to him. It's not risky to him. So when you're thinking about like, hey, is this risk worth taking? First of all, wait until you have some level of peace about it. Seek the counsel that you need. And let me just put a pin in that for a minute. All counsel that you need because you're a believer does not need to be spiritual counsel.
Correct.
Sometimes you need practical counsel. If your pastor ain't never ran no business, what are you going to tell you about entrepreneurship? Thus saith the Lord. Stop going to him for that.
That's absolutely right.
You have to be wise enough to know what type of counsel do you need for this situation. Do you need spiritual counsel? Do you need natural counsel? And then just step out and see how he responds. If it's something that he needs you to be doing, it'll either be, laid out like, oh my gosh, that couldn't have been nothing but God. Oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe how easy this came together. In this housing market, I was able to get a house that I didn't have to overpay for. But you just have to step out there and see how he responds. That's how you know that a risk is worth taking. You get the right information, you take the steps, you have a little bit of peace about it, but then after that, the rest, the how is none of your business. Just step out, take a step and see how he responds. It kind of goes back to, are we going or not? You can't get excited about this and recognize, oh, what are we going to do next? And a little bit of fear is normal. A little bit of fear is natural. I don't know if it's at this part in the book, but I talk about faith and fear have the same definition. They're both believing in something that hasn't happened. So since they're so similar, it's easy to feed both of them. So we have to recognize, are we feeding our faith or are we feeding our fear? And yes, again, sometimes saying we're going to pray about it, we're making prayer form of procrastination, we're making confirmation an idol, and all of it just comes down to the fact that we're scared. But the question is, can you do it scared? Can you take one little baby step even though you're scared?
That's interesting, the fact that you said faith and fear both are predicated on not knowing what's going to happen.
Yeah,
that's an interesting perspective. That's interesting because you're right. I never thought of it that way. That both of them, you don't know what's going to happen either way.
Yeah, but you believe it.
Right, whether it's faith or whether it's fear.
Faith or fear, you believe it.
Yeah, right. That's definitely, and I've heard the whole, the little quote or about faith and fear. Yeah, but I never heard it like that just now. That both of them require you to believe something that you don't know what's going to happen yet.
Mm-hmm. So what you're going to feed? Feed one and starve the other. But you get to pick.
Exactly. Chapter 11 says, don't block your shift. Now, I know a lot of times we say, don't block your blessing, or, if somebody's trying to give you something and you're telling them, no, I don't want it. It's like, no, I'll take it because I don't want to block your blessing. But this is saying, don't block your shift.
Yeah, I'm talking about destiny blockers. And, it's the book up to here is all telling you what to do. But I would be remiss if I didn't tell you what not to do. And so chapter number 11, blessing or destiny blockers, is all about all of the things or the primary things that you can actually get in the way of you shifting successfully. So I think that they are habits, beliefs that actually self-sabotage, what it is that you are trying to accomplish. And there's a lot of them. Doubt, comparison. I don't have it, directly in front of me, but waiting, wanting to be comfortable, all of these things that can very easily happen and happen very commonly, that can actually get in the way of shifting. Because you get to this point and it's like, oh, okay, great. I got to have more faith. I got to decide whether I'm going. I'm going to choose my priorities. Oh, wait. Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. We also have to be aware of some of the most common pitfalls that can prevent us from getting to the next level. And that's what not blocking your shift is all about. If you're not getting traction, like if you're trying to accomplish something and you're not getting traction, then usually one of these destiny blockers has gotten in your way. And you have to figure out, how do I get around that? How do I overcome this so that it doesn't become an obstacle?
Now, what's interesting, what came to me is that just now, as I'm sitting here holding the book, this is one of those, as you're thinking and reflecting and making analogies and comparisons. Up until 5 years ago, every car I had was a standard, was a 5-speed. And because I love driving stick shift compared to, automatic. And what was coming to me just now as you were talking, and this whole don't block your shift, was what came back to my mind was going through those gears, and at a certain speed, if you didn't shift, you were going to blow something. So if you did not shift from first to second when you got to a certain speed, you were getting ready to mess up your transmission. And what's coming to me is I'm talking to you, like, if in many of these, in all of these instances, actually, if you don't shift, something is going to go terribly wrong. Just like in that car where you're going to tear up your transmission. When it's a God shift and you keep refusing to shift.
Yeah. Listen, you can either shift or you can be shoved.
Right, and see, that's what's going to happen in L5 in a car or a truck. Whenever you have, you shift or you shut off. Exactly, and that's exactly what would happen. It would burn itself out. The transmission would burn, or it would just, run at a really high rate and eventually burn out. Like you just said, you shift or you shut off. So in chapter 12 is now we've made our way to a divine assignment.
Yeah, so by the time you get to this point, this is the third section of the book. The book is divided into three different sections: awaken, align, and activate. So by the time you get to this point of the book, it's with the understanding that you have everything behind you or under you has mastered at a certain level all the things that we've talked about, and now you get to the go part of the formula, and it's go where you're needed next, right? So the third part of the book is all about, now that you know what's going on, now that you have identified why it's happening, and you've began to identify where it is that you're going, now it's time for you to actually go, whether it's on a career path, whether it's something in your relationships, maybe it's moving somewhere different, maybe it's being something different. And this section of the book is all about taking action, because if we don't take action, then we never can expect to get any traction towards what it is that we're doing. So this part of the book is all about you being able to actually go where it is that you're being asked to go. And then reinvent yourself and get where you need to go.
And I know that's right. And then the last chapter, and interestingly enough, for those who are superstitious, you always know that number 13 is always associated with, as they say, quote unquote, bad luck. However, there are 13 chapters in Shayna's book. That's the last chapter of the book. It's chapter 13.
Never even thought about that, but you're right.
And it's divine.
I was just done at that point. I was like, well, I done said all I need to say.
There you go.
13.
And it says divine evolution.
Yeah.
That's where we are in chapter 13, the last chapter of the book, divine evolution. We're going to talk about that for a couple of minutes, and then I'm going to read the manifesto. And after that, I'm going to give Shayna an opportunity to promote, and before you know it, we'll be done. It has been a wonderful time as we've walked through the book. See, a lot of the books, because they are, and I'm not knocking long books. I'm really not. For the authors who have been on the show I'm not knocking them. However, this book, because of its brevity, if you will, it's deep, but at the same time brief. Again, going back to the Adam Clayton Powell quote, it's long enough to be respectful, but it's short enough to be interesting. It is just that. And so we were able to literally walk you through chapter by chapter and give you a synopsis. Now, if you want to get deeper into it, you're going to need to get the book. And the book is called and it's in my favorite colors. It's in my fraternity colors. It's Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. That, as soon as I saw it, the black and gold, I said, I wonder if she AKA, or does she know an alpha or something? I see, I see all that black and gold. But in any event, the name of the book is A God Shift, a divine move from disruption to destiny. The author is Shayna. That's my guest this morning. Shayna Rattler. Rattler. So let's go chapter 13. I'm going to read you the manifesto, and I'm going to give Shayna an opportunity to promote. So divine evolution.
Obviously, I'm going through my journey of God Shift. It's woven in and out. It's not an autobiography. It's not a novel, but I do weave the story of my God Shift in and out, through the book. And obviously, my life looked a lot different, than it did a handful of years ago. It continues to evolve, and it'll be the same for the readers as well. But one of the things that I end the book by saying is that the world needs the best version of you now. And every day that we don't access the wisdom and the information that is needed is a day delayed to answer the amazing life that is calling. And so, go through the evolution. None of us are supposed to stay the same. None of us are supposed to stay in the same place. And dare I say, many of us are not supposed to leave this earth doing the same thing that we used to do. That whole work somewhere 35 years and get the watch, and that's gone for a number of reasons. And so I end the book with an action plan that actually says, now that we've done all this is what I want you to do over the next 30 to 60 days. But the reality is that all of this is happening for you and not to you. And if we will actually take the steps that are in the book, I can guarantee you that your life will be unrecognizable. And you'll not only have a great life yourself, but you'll be able to help empower other people to access their shift as well. But other people's shift, other people are praying for you. So everybody else's shift and other things that people need are predicated on you getting this right. That's why the book is short, sweet, and to the point, because I don't want you to have any excuses. I don't want to meet somebody 6 months from now. They're like, well, I started, but, I'm only on chapter 4 because it's 800 pages just to get that far. That's my whole goal.
Well, I'll tell you what, when I leave the studio, I'm going out to breakfast, so I'm going to be reading it as I'm at the breakfast table. But there's the God Shift Manifesto, and actually I'm going to make a copy of this or either type it up and hang it up on my bedroom mirror. And it says and I thought I had done that, but now that I'm looking at it, I remember saying I was going to do it, and I haven't done it yet. The God Shift Manifesto. I am being called higher, greater is coming. I've embraced disruption. I'm ready to level up. Show me my destiny because I have important work to do. Created by Shayna Rattler. I'm going to read that again. It's called the God Shift Manifesto. I am being called higher, greater is coming. I've embraced disruption. I'm ready to level up. Show me my destiny because I have important work to do. Now, you just heard me say I'm going to make sure I get a copy of this, or either type a copy of it and print it out and hang it on my bedroom mirror or somewhere in the bathroom, somewhere I can see it every day so that I can constantly infuse this into my spirit. I encourage you to do the same. So I'll tell you what, like you said, you have an action plan on the back of it. I noticed in the bio you said you published 3 books previously. What were those 3? What were the titles of those 3?
So the very first book that I published was called Higher. It was a personal development book for business owners. The second book that I published was called, I don't even remember, something about becoming a yes magnet. It's about how you create predictable success. And it's a business book. And then my third book was The Secrets to Landing Corporate Sponsorship. So obviously it's a business book as well. And so, all of that is still in me. If you ever talk to me or have any questions about that kind of stuff, I still got it in me, but that's just, my assignment has changed. My purpose and my calling has not changed, but my assignment has just shifted. So this is my 4th book. I would like to say my last one, but every time I do that, he give me something else to write. So I'm done.
That's right. So I'll tell you what, at this point, I'm going to shut the mic off again, and I'm going to allow you to promote book signings, your work, websites, where you're going to be, how folks can contact you if they want to talk to you. You could say anything with the exception of a dollar amount. At that point, if folks contact you, you all can work pricing and all that kind of stuff. But that's the only thing we can't say on the air is a dollar amount. But any other thing, promotional, I'm going to turn the mic off for a couple of minutes, and feel free to let folks know websites, anything you want them to know. We're going to do that, and then we'll wrap up, and we'll be done.
Okay, perfect. So it won't take a couple of minutes. So if you want the book, hopefully by now, and don't do this. Don't be like, well, they walk me through every chapter, child. I got enough to put it in motion without it. Don't do that. So if you want the book, you can get the book at a GodShiftBook.com. That's a GodShiftBook.com. You can get the book by going to that landing page. If you're one of those people that we talked about earlier and perhaps finances are an issue right now and you're like, I know the book doesn't cost a lot, but I can't even afford that, then you can get a free guide that you can download today, and it will share the 4 things that you need to master if you're going to shift. So if that's you and you're like, listen, I just need to start with the free guide and I'll get the book later, you can get that at GodSaysShift.com. Again, that's GodSaysShift.com if you want to download the free guide. The website, of course, is GodShift.com. You can look at the T-shirts and the podcast and the television show. But the one thing that I will say is that for 2022, I'm dubbing that as the year to take control of your destiny. And one of the things that is coming in 2022 is a God Shift the Tour, where I will actually be going around to churches and organizations and doing a workshop on the principles of the book. So if you're listening to this session or to this episode and you have a church or an organization that you would like me to come next year and walk you all through the principles that are in this book, you can either reach out to us on the contact page on our website, or our email address is info@agodshift.com. So again, the book is agodshiftbook.com. The free guide is godsayshift.com. And if you're interested in us coming and doing a workshop for your church or organization, you can email us at info@agodshift.com. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that I've said something that has stepped on your toes to put you in action. I hope that I've told you something that makes you want to chase your destiny. So thank you so much.
Well, I'll tell you what, you said something that for me was confirmation and affirmation. And so as we talked this morning, a friend of mine, very good friend of mine who listens every Saturday, he said, that show is like therapy for you. I said, yeah, actually it is.
Yeah.
It really is. As I've talked to over the 21, I'm in my 21st season now. Over the years, I've talked to so many wonderful people from all walks of life. And it really is, like for me, a therapy session every Saturday morning. But it is the hope that for those of you who are listening, that you are learning something, you're being entertained, you're being inspired, you're being motivated. But if it has to be a therapy session for you as well, then so be it. But as we're listening to this and we're sharing, because there was something that Shayna said earlier about suffering in silence. That's not good to do. That's why we're dealing with so many different mental illnesses and everything else. Folks are holding things in and then they snap. And so it's not good to suffer in silence. And again, you have the opportunity to help somebody else with your story, because there's nothing new under the sun. And whatever any of us are going through, somebody else is going through it or have already gone through it. And so as God shifts us, I like that. And, like I said, my last car came back to my mind because it was a 5-speed before I bought this automatic. But in any event, certainly. And I just saw in the front, Shayna, where it's, and I'm going to do this too. It said, take a picture of yourself holding the book and tag it in Instagram. I'm going to do that. Tag it at God Shift and hashtag a God Shift. So later today, or maybe tomorrow when I get my church clothes on, or either my dashiki or something, I'm going to take a picture with it. Or I might do it today in the sweatshirt. Who knows? We'll see. But either way, I'm going to definitely take a photo holding the book and tag it a God Shift, as well as hashtag it a God Shift. Wonderful book. I was anticipating this interview from the time we rescheduled it. Again, listening audience, I encourage you to order the book. A very simple title. A God Shift. A divine move from disruption to destiny. I even love the alliteration with the D's. Divine, disruption, and destiny. All right now. Author is Shayna Rattler. Make sure you get a copy of the book. Shayna, thank you so much. Enjoy the Texas weather.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
We will be in touch. I will, as long as the recording came out okay and everything did what it's supposed to do, I will be uploading it to my YouTube channel, as well as sending you the links. And once you get those, you are free to do whatever you like with them.
All right. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Take care. Have a wonderfully blessed day and a great Thanksgiving.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Well, that wraps up another episode of the Reading Circle with Marc Medley. My guest this morning was Shayna Rattler. The book is A God Shift. 3 words. A God, G-O-D, Shift, S-H-I-F-T.